The fight between Kokushibo and the pillars is simply incredible, marking some of the most intense moments in Demon Slayer's history. In this battle, the strongest upper moon shows his overwhelming power against the most powerful pillars, Sanemi, Gyomei, Michiro, and Jinya. They face the fight of their lives, creating an epic sequence in the manga. However, this battle is not without its criticism. Today, we will discuss the hits and misses of this fight, from Kokushibo's death, which happens in a somewhat strange way, to the most exciting moment, like when Sanemi and Gyomei cut off his ear. We'll explore both the negatives and positives, highlighting what could have been better, and celebrating the aspects that truly shined. The first part of this video will be more critical, pointing out details that could be improved. In the second part, I'll talk about everything that is genuinely good in this fight. The battle begins when Nakime, the Upper Moon 4, manipulates the castle and transports the Mist Hashira, Michiro Takedo, to a large hall, separating him from Gyomei. Initially, this wouldn't be a problem, as without the mark, Michiro was genuinely weaker than Gyomei. However, with the mark, he could easily be considered one of the strongest pillars of the Taisho era. In that hall, everything changes. Michiro faces an opponent against whom he has no chance, Kokushibo. Here, we have a point that seemed promising, but ends up being lost. The Upper Moon analyzes Michiro through the transparent world and genetic pattern, concluding that the Mist Hashira is his descendant. This revelation confuses Michiro, who begins to question his lineage and his own talent. The problem with this information is that it is not developed. We know that Michiro is a descendant of Michikatsu Tsujikuni, which explains his prodigious talent, even at such a young age. However, this connection could have been explored more deeply. Nowadays, we can easily connect Michiro to Yorichi and sun breathing. In theory, he is a descendant of both Michikatsu and Yorichi's family, meaning that Yorichi's blood also runs through his veins. After that, the fact that Michiro has this blood becomes almost irrelevant, as it is more symbolic than functional. The transformation into a demon does not have time to occur, as everything culminates in Kokushibo cutting him in half and ending his life. We do not get to see how this issue could have been worked into the story, leaving Michiro just questioning a bit more about his origin, his parents' genetic, and the reason for his existence, his path, and his family. In the Swordsmith village, there is a clear reference to Michiro's personality, similar to Tanjiro Kamido's, and there is even a theory linking Michiro to the Kamido family, suggesting a possible descent from Sumiyoshi Kamido. However, this information is not well developed. It seems like something thrown into the story just to justify Michiro's prodigious talent, and explain why he is facing Upper Moon 1 instead of another Hashira. This bothers me a lot. Though it is not a glaring error, it still displeases me. The next thing that bothered me, and I believe it bothered many people, is the fact that the characters arrive at the location slowly and spaced out. We do not have a full-on combat of the Hashiras against the strongest Upper Moon. What we see are several individual confrontations against someone clearly superior. First, we have the duel between Michiro and Kokushibo. After Michiro is defeated, Jinya appears and is easily cut down. Then, Sanemi exchanges blows, but is also nearly cut in half. Finally, when Sanemi is about to die, Gyomei arrives. It seems that the author weakened all the characters before the real fight started. When the truly serious confrontation happens, Gyomei is already marked. Sanemi is all wounded, Michiro has severe injuries, and Jinya is traumatized and lost. This sequence of weakening the characters individually against Kokushibo creates the impression that he was defeated by the plot. In theory, if Michiro, Sanemi, Jinya, and Gyomei had arrived together and in full form, they could have had a real chance against him. Michiro, for example, manages to make the red blade without using his hands, showing how powerful he is, even when injured. Another thing that bothered me was Kokushibo's nostalgia. When he cuts Jinya's body, he remembers a hunter who was similar to him 300 years ago. He also identifies with Sanemi and Jinya, as they are demon hunting brothers. This identification causes Kokushibo not to finish off Gyomei and Sanemi immediately, but rather tests them to discover their limits, remembering when he trained with his colleague, who was also the Wind Pillar. Kokushibo only gradually speeds up the pace, but it is noticeable to Sanemi that his speed is increasing more and more. Any mistake could result in his death. This leveling after humiliating Takedo to turn him into a demon is strange. As Sanemi associates the missed Hashira's defeat with lack of experience, justifying the loss. Kokushibo's drop in performance to favor the pillars is unjustifiable. It might have been better if Jiaomai and Sanemi had arrived together at the location, resulting in a 2-on-1 fight, avoiding this forced leveling. My final criticism is about the ending. Chapter 175 would have been perfect, with Jiaomai and Sanemi decapitating Upper Moon 1 after Michiro sacrifices himself and Jinya uses his last strength to nullify the Blood Moon technique. The Nichiren blades of the hunters turn red, cutting through Kokushibo's extremely hard neck, a memory of Yorichi that could surpass anyone. This would have been a beautiful and epic ending. However, the author decided that Kokushibo should regenerate his head, making him practically invincible, except for the sun. He saw himself in the reflection of Sanemi's sword and suddenly reconsidered his 480-year-old convictions, regretting everything. I cannot accept that Kokushibo gave up everything just because he thought he was ugly. Kokushibo talks about his horrible appearance and the ugliness of being cut down by the hunters, but he could have easily killed everyone and manipulated his body back to its normal appearance, just like any Upper Moon can. He can manipulate his own sword, so he should be able to do the same with his body, returning to his old appearance. From the moment he regenerates his head, it seems like the author gets a bit lost. This really bothers me, especially because Kokushibo, in a ridiculously quick manner, gives up everything he created for centuries, which in my view makes no sense at all. Now, let's get to the good part. As I mentioned at the beginning, this video is divided into 2 parts, and now I'm going to talk about what I love about this fight. Michiro is one of the highlights. Seeing the missed Hashira face off against the strongest Upper Moon is very interesting. When he awakens his mark, Michiro becomes the strongest Hashira in the castle, except for Jitomioka and Tanjiro Kamado, who had already finished their fights against Akaza and were extremely strengthened with their hunter mark. Michiro had everything to be a problem for any demon except Kokushibo. Upper Moon 1 is a natural counter to Mist Breathing's ability. Michiro's fighting style wasn't suited for facing someone like Kokushibo, who trained to face Yorichi. Kokushibo developed not only reflexes and speed, but also an expanded field of vision, allowing him to see everything around him regardless of the attack's origin. For Michiro's abilities to work, he would need to be faster than his target and able to deceive his perception, which is unfeasible against Kokushibo. Even when using his 7th form, Kokushibo merely dodges and praises Michiro's skills, especially considering his age. The author highlights Michiro's inexperience, who, despite being one of the strongest humans there, made the mistake of trying to face Upper Moon 1 directly, resulting in the loss of his hand and his complete defeat. Sanemi's arrival brings a really impressive fight. Sanemi's technique is extremely well crafted, using the entire environment around him to reach the demon's level in front of him. He even uses Jinya's weapon and katana to try to injure Kokushibo. Instead of a direct confrontation, Sanemi looks for gaps in the opponent's defense, assuming any mistake could result in his death. His survival is due to his experience, especially when he's cut and fights with his belly practically open, using his muscles and breathing to stay alive. Sanemi uses his noble blood to disorient Kokushibo, but the gap was so big that he would have died if not for Jiaomai Himajima's arrival. Another Hashira who has an exceptional fight with Kokushibo is Jiaomai Himajima. While he is unmarked, Kokushibo analyzes and gets excited to see that Jiaomai is a rare human, with a giant physical build and at the peak of his form. This makes Kokushibo want to see how far Jiaomai could go. Jiaomai's use of chain and axe and his fast and agile fighting style allows him to find weak points in Kokushibo and attack him, even cutting a part of his kimono and a strand of his hair. However, the author intentionally unbalances the power by having Kokushibo break Jiaomai's sword and regenerate it, causing a severe cut on the Hashira's face and nearly killing him. Jiaomai acknowledges that he would have certainly died there if he hadn't awakened his mark. From here, upon awakening his mark due to the provocation, the fight becomes even more incredible, as now both were at a very close level. Jiaomai, now marked, manages to defend against Kokushibo's attack, something that would have been fatal if he weren't marked. With 2 marked Hashiras, Jiaomai and Sanemi, the fight against Kokushibo becomes more balanced. The author highlights the increasing teamwork of the Hashiras, with Jiaomai and Sanemi able to deliver alternating blows in perfect sync, a brilliant move by the author. After Kokushibo Kokushibo loses an ear and has his kimono completely destroyed by the Hashira's synchronization, he finally shows his true power. At this point, Upper Moon 1's level becomes evident, and the Hashiras can no longer fight properly. Sanemi loses his fingers, and Gyomei saves his life. The fight balances out again only when Gyomei manages to get through Kokushibo's 10th form with Sanemi's help and the use of the transparent world, finally hitting the demon. Jinya's arrival, although the weakest, completely changes the confrontation. He immobilizes Kokushibo by eating part of his body and develops a Kekijutsu specific to the situation. This was a plot device, but very well done, making Jinya, the weakest, essential in that fight. Even though they are fatally attacked, Jinya and Michiro use their last strength to immobilize Kokushibo and make a red blade, allowing Gyomei and Sanemi to cut Kokushibo, thus beginning the end of the battle. The situation becomes complicated when Kokushibo regenerates his head, something that, as I mentioned before, I didn't like much. We reach the end of the fight with a flute that Yorichi carried, given by Michikatsu when they were young. This shows that, deep down, Kokushibo never hated his brother, but always carried envy for not being Yorichi. This symbolism is very well worked into the story, especially with Michikatsu and Yorichi's past being told during the fight. The flute becomes a magical and unforgettable element, unexpectedly surprising in this gigantic battle between the strongest Upper Moon and the Hashiras. As usual, leave in the comments what you liked the most and the least about this video. I'll also leave 2 videos here that I'm sure you'll like, so don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any content. See you next time.